Everyone, let us welcome Marieke Nijkamp to Dragon Talk. Welcome.
Yay! We're so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad I'm here too. Wait, yep. Let's go with that. It's like I haven't been anywhere else lately, but
yeah, transporting you
at home. Yeah,
but your office looks so nice.
It's lovely. This is basically my dream come true office. Yeah,
that's wonderful. So you are calling in from the Netherlands.
I am. Yeah,
amazing.
Across the pond.
Oh, very yes.
What's it been like over there? Yeah. What's been happening?
I mean, well, we just found out that masks are probably good, so I feel like we're making progress. It's been an interesting year.
Right?
I don't. We've been doing relatively okay, I guess. Like in the sense that obviously the virus happens, but we managed to more or less get it under control this summer, and now we're back. So
really?
I'm not leaving the house until all of this is done.
Yeah.
Except to go to the dentist tomorrow because,
Ooh.
Yeah,
dentist.
Still have to
that's
maintain your health.
Yeah.
You should write a book around the trip to the dentist.
54 minutes
story.
at the dentist.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the last times I went to the dentist was like relatively late in the afternoon, early evening, and he just randomly like blasted opera music throughout the building, which I can tell you that feels like walking into a horror movie
it
right
really
there.
Does.
Yeah.
It does. I feel like there's something about like hearing blasting opera music, but also like having your mouth open the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like that particular combination is like I would not recommend.
Yeah, it's like Phantom of the Opera. Basically, you're like, oh, where's he's wearing a mask. It's very
not that kind of mask, but yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good mask for this situation. Only covers half your face.
I was not amused.
So, being a creative person, have you found more creativity in this time, or is it harder to find your inspiration?
It's honestly a bit of both. I found that writing is a very good escape for the state of the world right now.
Yeah.
Which has been surprisingly helpful, just to be able to like basically have fun in story worlds where there isn't a virus and the world isn't burning and fascism isn't happening. So, feels pretty okay to be writing books.
It's just weird that like we have to go to books to escape that when what you're describing actually sounds like something we would be watching or reading and shaking our heads at.
Just going back to post-apocalyptic books right now and like dystopian fiction and occasionally reading that, like most dystopian fiction definitely made humanity look a whole lot smarter than it is, which would not expect that we would have discussions about, is this virus actually happening when everyone can see it is. So that's I'm definitely looking at those genres with a bit of a different eye these days.
Yeah. And a lot of people are staying in and then obviously reading a lot more, which has got to be gratifying.
I mean, absolutely, like, because it works that way for me. Like, I love escaping in fiction, and if I can do that for other people, then I'd be happy to offer them a bit of an escape, a bit of a letdown from like daily life.
Yeah. Are you participating in any D&D online sessions too?
Technically, yes. Mostly it means that my main group just comes together once a week and talks about everything, and then like 3 hours in realizes that, oh wait, we should have been playing at some point.
That sounds about right.
Still good.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's lovely to see my friends, and it's lovely to hang out, and occasionally I do get to play, but I do notice that everyone is just struggling with like full heads and overflowing thoughts, and sometimes that makes it slightly harder to also focus on creating worlds and stories together.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really want to dig into your books because, like I said, I ordered all of them and I want to know more and I want to hear about your creative process and all. But there is a reason why we have you on Dragon Talk, and that is because you are a D&D fan.
I am.
And when were you first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons?
I was about 15, 16, I think. So it's a while ago. I initially started roleplay in terms of just like text-based roleplay in early days of the internet when I was young. Maybe should not have been on the internet quite that much, but things happen.
That's where you learn, right?
It turned out
exactly.
fine.
It's super educational.
That's air quotes around educational there.
Yep. But yeah, I was definitely into just like shared storytelling, and then at some point, a friend of mine from choir was at the youth choir. She invited me to her D&D group, and I was like, I'm into this. I don't know anything about that. Sounds fun. This was definitely also in like at the time where I live in middle of nowhere, the Netherlands. So the whole satanic panic happened slightly later here. Oh. So it was definitely this thing where people were still worried about fantasy books and role playing and all of that. So it felt kind of edgy, cool to try, but also stories. Stories are great. So that part was easy. So yeah, I joined her and basically never looked back. Very much lucked out with a group with a female DM, which was pretty rare at the time too.
Yeah.
First game was I played a thief in 2nd edition. So I still get to tell new players about Thaco and horrify them, which is great.
And your kit, whatever your kit was.
Back in my day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is how backstabbing worked back in the day. Sit around, kids. So yeah, no, that was, like I said, that's how I rolled into it and didn't look back. And basically have been playing ever since.
One thing that always I'd love to ask is, was that formative for you? Like, did you have that as your archetype always for characters going forward? Do you always like to play rogues or sneaky characters, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do occasionally love playing other characters as well. I just recently played a warlock, which was great because I just really like punk characters, basically. But yeah, given the chance, I usually default to thieves, rogues, sneaky type characters with stabby things.
What is it about that fascinates you, do you think?
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what that says about me, honestly. I don't know. I've never like playing tanks never really appealed to me, and spellcasting is fun, but like has its limitations. I love the idea, and I think it probably has to do too with the books I read growing up. Like I love the idea of thieves and thieves guilds and just like sneaking around and gathering secrets as much as just like fighting, and intrigue is fun. So I think it's more that side of it too than just the backstabbing. Though on occasion, like sneak attack is great. So that helps.
You can save the day with that just as much as you can with a charge from the paladin.
Absolutely. And it's also just a lot of fun, like annoying the more like straight-laced characters in a group.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're that. Now I'm getting
This is
perfect
like
picture
every
of you as
rogue.
character.
person.
That's why you like to play the rogue. I always hear rogue
Yeah.
players are like, oh, and I just really like to annoy people, the other players, and cause trouble. I'm like,
just poke them and see
Yes.
what happens. Yeah.
right, yeah.
That's so funny because
Pickpocket.
I'm thinking of a specific person that I played with who loved always playing rogues, and it wasn't even necessarily. I mean, they liked the rogues and the intrigue and the stuff that you're talking about, but the memory that is cemented in my brain about them was the fact that it was always a snarky comment. It was always like a, oh well, I've got my own agenda, but you can do what you want, I guess. That type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no. Very roguey.
And if you want to follow the main plot, whatever.
If you want to be a goody two shoes, fine. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
What was your DM like? I'm interested to find out about. As you mentioned, a woman as a DM was rare in that time frame. So, what kind of storytelling did they bring to the table that was of interest to you?
It was very much. I feel like it was very much like traditional fantasy, but everyone in the group was geeky and nerdy in one way or another. We had a very science-focused group, which was fun. Like everyone I'd say like 80% of that group went on to study like sciencey things. I'm a historian. I don't know how science works. But yeah, so she was very detail oriented in terms of just like creating the worlds and setting up stories in ways that I still kind of admire. I'm that writer now too, but not always that DM. So that in particular just really stuck by me. And obviously, like, we had a very math-focused group too, which really gelled with like early versions of D&D. So it was interesting to see that part. Like there was this very, like I said, I'd come from text-based RPGs on the internet, and most of those were with other aspiring writers. So those were very focused on the story and on making sure the story followed certain lines, followed certain tropes or like structures. And this suddenly had that element of playing with dice and doing the math stuff and figuring out the nitty-gritty of the world in ways that I wasn't quite familiar with through those text-based RPGs. So that was an element that she definitely brought to the table, but also something that I discovered in that particular group and grew really fond of. Not just because dice are great, but also, yeah.
Always got them nearby.
Yep. I have a few fidget dice as well, just to play with when I'm doing stuff and thinking about books or not thinking about anything at all.
They're like nice little fidgety toys.
They really
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was certainly an element that, and just having that sense of knowing that she had a wider world that we got to explore really appeals to me, and also made being a DM really appealing to me, which is why I stumbled into that quite quickly.
Really? So quite quickly after learning how to play D&D,
Yes.
you took on the role of Dungeon Master?
Yes. Yep.
Why do you say stumbled? What happened?
I mean, mostly because it took me a while to figure out how to handle that well. And like I said, I came into a group that already existed with players who'd already spent time with each other and who had a sort of chemistry going, and I had a lot of fun with them. But when you go from this sort of familiarity to trying to create a new group and trying to sort of mimic that, it definitely feels awkward at times, and it takes a little while to get used to. So it did for me too. But I really just fell in love with it when I studied abroad a couple of years later and found a group there to play with and introduced them to the game, and I think that was for me the main part where that was the first group that really felt like my group, and where it felt like creating a story was almost a kind of gift to them as well as just playing the game itself.
Yeah, which is probably, I'm gonna guess, is that how it feels when you write a book? Like you have given this gift to your readers. You've created this story in this world for them to enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly more direct when you're DMing. When I'm writing, I don't necessarily have like specific readers in mind that I'm writing for.
Right.
So when
you're
I'm
not thinking of Shelley when you're writing.
You will now.
Now
that you know I'm such a fan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like every book going forward, I'll be thinking of Shelley first.
Wait to see them dedicated to me. Once again, this book is dedicated to Shelley. And again.
Yep. 546.
Yeah, I mean,
Still to Shelley.
I am your muse now.
Perfect. Well, next time I have writer's block, I'll know where to find you.
Call me.
Yeah.
Call me. It'll probably be,
Okay.
Excellent. I can help with that.
We have talked to a couple of authors in the past too, and it does always seem to think that like they love dungeon mastering, and then it just feels like, a lot of the world building and the storytelling that goes into creating a good D&D session, a lot of those are similar. They're obviously not the same, but they're similar when you're crafting a book or a scene in a book.
Absolutely. Though technically, like in most situations, my characters do what I want them to do slightly more often than my players.
Slightly.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have a little more control over them, I guess.
None of them have ever gone back and woken up a dragon, and one of my players has definitely done that.
Woken up the dragon?
Yes, after sneaking past it
And
going back. I don't know.
Was it a rogue?
Don't know.
Was it possibly the rogue that decided just to cause a little trouble and just see what would happen?
What do you mean rogues causing trouble? Rogues never cause trouble.
It was a burglar, clearly.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a rogue at all.
Yeah.
That's funny. What was the type of stories that you told in the first sessions of you dungeon mastering? Were they generic fantasy? Did they lean more towards intrigue or anything like that?
Definitely generic fantasy. Very much both the dungeons and the dragons.
That's all you need.
I know, right? What else is there?
Yeah.
So no, those are very much generic, like this medieval-esque type world. Though usually slightly more actually medieval or actually fantasy, because at that point I had been studying medieval history for a while, so professional defamation, I guess, that sneaks in. So yeah, it took a while to get to a point where the world and the stories and the intrigue and the plot felt more like my own, because experience is good, and
gotta build up
in
those,
hindsight it's pretty okay that they weren't back then, but being your own worst critic and all that, that definitely is a thing that holds true both for writing and DMing.
That is very true.
Yes.
But I think what DMing does, at least for me, was the show must go on to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like you had a deadline, you had a session that was coming up, and so you couldn't just be like, well, I'll get to writing that paragraph later and then never do it. You were like, well, you needed to, and you needed to have these prompts from your players that made you have to basically write in your head and improvise. And that to me has loosened any kind of writer's block or anything that I've ever had. Having those improv skills must help for that, right?
Absolutely does. Weirdly also helps for promoting books, because it made me so much more comfortable with like public speaking.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's the bane of a lot of authors' lives is like, I have to actually like talk to people now about this work, and you just want to write.
What do you mean? I can't just stare at my computer and exist in Word and nothing else?
Sure, I just wrote a book that was like how to meet people and sway. I don't know how to do that myself.
Nope.
It's all research, man. It's all research.
This, by the way, is 100% why I have never and will never play a bard.
I'm kind of with you on that. Yeah.
Look, I will improvise to my heart's like content, and I'm happy to stab or spell sling or whatever. But a charisma, man, charisma's hard.
It is hard. It's hard to role play that for sure, unless
Yeah.
you have that in your back
Yeah.
pocket. That so many people we do. We just talked to Critical Bard here, and he was like, you very clearly, oh yeah, you are a bard in real life as well as around the table.
Absolutely, yes.
So with your medieval history, let's talk a little bit about that, because that's fascinating for me. I'm playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3 right now, so I'm certainly in that realm of medieval fantasy, and it obviously informs a lot of the kind of generic fantasy that we've been talking about. So what led you to wanting to learn more about it? Was Dungeons and Dragons an inspiration?
It was definitely a part of it. Yeah, like reading fantasy, playing D&D, all of that basically informed my wanting to like major in medieval history, to the horror of some of my teachers. But I mean, it's just the thing is too, I've always been fascinated by stories, and I think that's why I'm a writer, but also why D&D appeals to me so incredibly much. Like I love how stories kind of inform who we are as people. I love that we use storytelling as a way to understand what it means to be human. And storytelling in medieval times is particularly fascinating because it exists in, I mean, my focus has always been medieval Europe. So I'm using medieval times as a bit of an easy shortcut, which I shouldn't do, because other countries exist and we're doing far more interesting things in some cases than Europe.
That's very true.
But there's this really interesting era of human history where people in Europe sort of rediscover that the rest of the world exists, and that there are a huge part of the world that they're not aware of yet. Basically, the here be dragons. The idea of here be dragons, like this is a part of the world that we don't know anything about, and we'll sort of just assume that strange things happen here, even though no one actually believed the dragons part. But it's just this idea of interacting with other ways of being, interacting with the unknown, interacting with other cultures, that just endlessly fascinates me, and I think is honestly still super relevant for today too.
Yeah, and it informs fairy tales too.
Yeah,
like a lot
absolutely.
of those ideas of elves and seven dwarves and all that stuff really was about encountering cultures that were different than the ones that were in Europe at the time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is that it's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about good representation in fantasy too, is just the knowledge that this whole generic idea of fantasy was never really historical. Like, obviously it wasn't, because magic and dragons, but also this idea of like cis, straight, white, male-dominated Europe never really existed. Like, people of color existed in Europe throughout history. Queer people have existed in Europe throughout history. Certainly in medieval history, there are really cool examples of that. So it was also just this really interesting way of figuring out like who we are now is constantly reflected to us by history. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And you're a very big proponent of diversity in books as well. You were, we need diverse books. Were you the founder, or you're the
I was on the founding board.
Yeah.
I was one of the first, like the first panel we did. First time sort of the hashtag formed into an organization. I was part of that, along with many, many amazing writers and creators. I was definitely not the founder.
For which organization? What was this?
We need diverse books.
And diversify.
Diversify YA was a website I created, and that was also how I kind of rolled into We Need Diverse Books. But that was definitely the brainchild of Ellen O and many others, and I had the great honor to serve on the founding board and
that's amazing.
Be able to give back a bit.
Yeah, and it's obviously important work for any age, but especially for that young adult audience that, when they're first starting to discover who they are and question who they are, and is this okay? Is this normal? And then to see themselves represented in the books that they're reading, that's huge. I remember growing up, like the books that I remember reading were like, or other kids reading were like The Hobbit or Sweet Valley High, about like two blonde California twin girls and like their cool car and their cool boyfriends.
You're talking about The Hobbit, right?
Yes. I don't mean to like spoil The Hobbit for anyone who hasn't read it. But Jessica and Todd do break up at the end. Sorry, spoiler.
Oh no.
But yeah, and it is, and there is still a ways to go. I know, but it's wonderful that you have been involved in this really important initiative.
Yeah, it's super personal for me too. Like I'm non-binary. Did not have a word for that until just a couple of years ago, because I did not know that was even a possibility. I just knew that I didn't feel comfortable in my skin and didn't really like connect to the word woman or anything like that. And it was through the literary community too, and seeing other like public non-binary people that I finally had this realization of, hey, that's me, that's who I am, that's something that I can explore. And like you said, I think that's so important for teens to have at a young age, in YA books. Honestly, even earlier than that too, because so many teens know who they are early on, and it's obviously not just like gender identity and orientation, sexual orientation or romantic orientation. It's also about making sure that characters of color are main characters in books, that readers of color see themselves reflected, that disabled readers see themselves reflected, and that non-marginalized readers see other people reflected as well, and see that they can be heroes in stories and that they can deserve to be in the limelight, because that's as important as having that mirror is having books as a means to form empathy towards others.
Yeah, that's what I always think. Dungeons and Dragons does very well, almost as a side effect of its main stated goals of having a great storytelling, framework for it to hang out with your friends. But it also gives this safe place to, play roles that are of different genders, of different sexual orientations, and do so under the guise of adventuring. But we've talked to a few individuals who have said that they finally learned that part about themselves through role play, through Dungeons and Dragons, and would not have made the leaps that they had made to understand what they were feeling without those safe spaces.
That's honestly a big part for me too. Like I found myself drawn to male characters more often than not, because I had the opportunity to play and sort of figure out ways of interacting with gender that I couldn't in real life to that degree. So it was definitely a major part for me too, in just figuring out like, hey, you don't have to be restricted to what people expect of you.
Yeah, I was reading an interview that you had done, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but somebody had asked about, you have developed characters in your stories, obviously, that are non-binary or queer, people of color, and they asked about, they asked you something, I wish I could remember because this is not going to be as good, but asked you about creating those characters and why they were important. And I think you had responded with something like, nobody ever asked me why Claire is straight and white.
Oh.
And, and that is a choice too. Like that is just as important a choice as why we're putting these other characters in the books, but nobody ever, which just shows that is that assumption that the main character, is white and straight and abled. So it's which I thought that response was really that just said a lot about where we are in our portrayal of other characters.
Yeah, no, there is definitely just this assumption that white, cis, hetero, able people are sort of a default that everyone should be able to connect to. And I think to a degree too, most of us have learned to connect to those characters because we have to. And obviously, when I look at fiction, I see myself reflected often enough. I'm super white, like I'm Dutch, I nearly fluorescent at times.
That's funny. I just spoke to a Dutch person this morning and they said that exact same thing.
Really?
Yes, it seems to be like a default way to express their whiteness.
That's interesting, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I don't have to look forward to seeing myself represented in fiction. I do have to look forward to see my experiences represented in fiction, and I think that's it's also one of the reasons why it took me a while to get to a point where I figured it was okay to write a non-binary main character. It was okay to write a physically disabled main character or an autistic main character, because even I had never assumed that characters like me could be the heroes of stories in that sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I like that you threw that question back at the reporter in a certain way where you're like,
I might have made it sound more antagonistic than it was, but it was very polite. But I just,
but it's something that's important too, because I in talking to like Tanya DePass, for example, from and she created the I Need Diverse Games. I think in homage to what you and your organizations that you were involved with had created. But she's often expressed that to me, where it's we all the questions I get are about diversity and not about the storytelling choices or the books and the things that are going on. And so while it's important to have those conversations and to be upfront about them and how important they are, I think there's also some fatigue with having to be like, that's the only question that's important right now. What about the book? Do you want to talk about the book and how cool it is? Speaking of which, we should talk about the book and how cool it is.
Oh, absolutely. But that is certainly true. And I think that's honestly a call to action too for like straight, cis, white people to take that up and have those conversations among themselves as well, or more. Because obviously, definitely don't talk over marginalized people, but also make sure that marginalization isn't just the only thing that we talk about, because it definitely does get exhausting at times. And it's a part of me, and I will not deny that. It's like who I am, and it informs me, but that isn't everything, nor should it be.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well.
And so what's cool about your book is that it is a group of role players. Or are they playing a game that's D&D? Is it explicitly called out as D&D, or is it?
Nope.
Okay.
It's a homebrew.
Stand down, lawyer. Stand down.
It's all right to mention it. It's not. It's fine. I'm the lawyer here, so no.
Explicitly D&D. But no, it's a homebrew system too.
Yeah. So what? I know what the elevator pitch is, but how would you describe to D&D listeners right now as to why it's exciting to potentially pick this up?
So Even If We Break is about a group of 5 teens who have come together, formed their friendship through an RPG game. And they've been together for the better part of 3 years, except last couple of months there have been some cracks and some things below the surface. But this is kind of the last weekend that they're hanging out before some of them are going off to college, doing other things. So they have one last weekend to play their game and just connect and be together. So they go to a cabin in the woods, which is, always a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely safe. no issues at all.
No
Yeah.
And they live
monsters.
happily ever after.
The end. Spoiler.
And they all get married together.
Exactly. So no, that doesn't happen. They go to a cabin in the woods and things go haywire from there, and the game turns quite deadly.
Is it a supernatural thriller or more of a personal thriller?
It's more a personal thriller. It's honestly as much to a story about friendship and like the good friendships we have, but also the toxic friendships and how they inform us and affect us. And about secrets. Like, all of the characters have secrets, and that's sort of what starts breaking them up. More so than any other supernatural effect or I like sure the characters do refer to like ghost stories about the cabin, because if you go to a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere, there have to be ghost stories,
Right.
If only to just like tease each other a bit and see who scares first. But no, it's the secrets they keep from each other that will start to break them up in the book.
Yeah. And the
Good
cover is so
cover. I have it here. Shall I?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Look at the super creepy masks.
Yeah.
I do not have this cover face out anywhere in my house because it terrifies
Because it
me.
creeps you out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to probably remove that cover when the book comes.
That's reasonable. I love it. I love that it does what it needs to do.
Yeah, it definitely
But
stands
also,
out.
it's super scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am interested with the playing with friendship, idea because, so many of the guests that we've had on Dragon Talk before have talked about how the friendships they form around the table playing D&D, are, sometimes the most meaningful relationships in their lives. They last
Absolutely.
for decades. And so having that be put to the test in a novel form, that sounds really exciting to me because, I think a lot of people who are listening here will realize like, oh yeah, like I what would happen if something like this happened to my group, and you can kind of imagine it.
Yeah, honestly, that particular what if was basically what sparked the book too. Like for me too, my current group they're some of my closest friends, both of my current groups actually, and that friendship means a lot to me. Like the shared experiences at the table, but also like outside of the game, that has meant a whole lot to me at various points throughout the last couple of years. And what basically sparked the book was the idea of like, what if you have a close-knit friendship like that and something goes wrong?
Mm-hmm.
If like the friction appears between some of the characters, like one character expects another character to do something and they don't do it, outside situation influences the friendship, decisions characters make influence other characters. What happens if all of that starts to show cracks and tears, and what happens if someone takes that and tries to break it open completely?
And they're all wearing masks.
I mean,
Just like all of us.
Yeah.
aren't we all?
It's not any different. Yeah. It's really no different.
Exactly.
Is your creative process for when you start thinking about a book and developing that world and that story and those characters similar to how you would approach a new D&D campaign as the dungeon master? Is there any parallels in those processes?
It's absolutely similar. In the sense that, especially when I start a new campaign, I tend to go all out on like building worlds and creating characters and plotting out various storylines that characters may follow through on, players may follow through on. I love the idea of just creating and building this kind of sandbox for my players to play in. And to some extent, that's certainly true for books as well. Like I love all the prep work of writing, building those characters, creating the setting. In this case, just figuring out what the cabin looks like as a sort of map almost.
Oh yeah, that's got, especially for the
Oh,
kind
that's
of
interesting.
plot
Yeah.
that you're describing. You know, the layout is, you know, paramount of importance.
It's super helpful to have that, to have a good idea of what that looks like. And yeah, I like, we for a pre-order giveaway, a friend of mine designed cabin layouts, and it was so much fun.
Fun.
It was so much fun. So I do actually still have a few of those left. So if any listeners want one, they should just email me and I'll send them.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you
amazing.
can set your own murder mystery
Yeah.
happening in the cabin.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so
exactly.
cool.
So yeah, but I think beyond that, books are definitely far more involved, in the sense that when I create my games, I usually create plot hooks and
Yeah.
ideas, and beyond that, at this point, mostly improvise during the sessions themselves. Like, I generally have a good idea of what my players will do. Except in all those cases when they don't do what I expect.
Yeah,
And
except
wake
for the
up the
one that
dragon.
wakes up the dragon. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't anticipating that.
You know, honestly, who could have foreseen that?
Suboptimal
I probably
choices.
should have, because I know the player. But
Well, they were playing a rogue, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
but that's interesting because you also have
yeah.
4, you know, or 5, or however many players like as co-collaborators, right? So you can write those hooks, and you just will be like, all right, well, they're gonna fill in the blanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and obviously for the books that isn't the case.
Yeah.
Much though
It's
I'd
all
like
on
that to
you.
happen, it's all me. Yeah, so it's far more involved in terms of actual story prep. It's a lot of writing synopsis and having spreadsheets of plot elements and time that passes in the book. It's very, very well planned, to the point of slight obsession occasionally.
That's good. It works for you.
Yeah.
A lot of what I've seen you praised for is your characters and how compelling they are and how well-rounded they are. And it made me wonder if perhaps all of those years of D&D and creating characters, has that helped with your creating characters for your book world, or different?
Probably, yeah. I've certainly written books where I just use like character sheets as a sort of starting point, just to get a sense of what the characters. Yeah, it's super helpful. But it's mainly in learning to ask questions about characters and what makes them tick, and like what their dreams are, what their fears are, what their hopes for themselves or their friends or like the world at large are. And those are the elements that make me enjoy role-playing characters, but also make me enjoy writing characters. And for me, those two are very closely related.
Yeah, I can see that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So the name of the book is Even If We Break, and it is out now.
It is.
I can't wait to jump in and read that, and maybe use it as inspiration for a thriller. I think it's kind of a thing that's not really shown in D&D often, right? Like, you know, as you mentioned, it's all about, you know, slaying the dragon and getting the treasure and things like that. But it's funny how hearing you describe it, it is very similar to many of the themes that Chris Perkins added to Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. You know, the secrecy, this feeling of paranoia and things like that. So good synergy with Mr. Perkins there.
Oh, yeah.
Great minds, great minds.
Yeah, definitely intended.
Yeah, right. Just like the mask thing was intended, you know, when most of the world is wearing masks.
Absolutely. Yes. I figured let's just make sure that there's a good reason for people to wear. No. Nope.
But it is, I think, going to be interesting for people to pick up your book and think about it from that angle of like inspiration for how to run a campaign that is a little bit different, you know, than the standard fantasy. Are you? Does that make sense to you? Do you think people will get some of those, you know?
No, absolutely. I certainly hope so. There are elements in the book too, aside from just like the straight thriller story. We've also included like elements of the game that they're playing.
Nice.
just to get a sense of what would it look like in a fantasy setting, and also because I love fantasy, so it was fun to sort of play with that. So yeah, I certainly hope that readers will take this as inspiration for their own murder mysteries, thrillers. I love playing intrigue laden stories, so I would love to see more of those.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to pull off.
Yeah. I mean, I also wrote a murder mystery RPG to go with the book because I'm that person.
Really?
So yeah, it's just like a 2-page. Like if the book inspires you to do something yourself, this is a way to go about it. So with a few hints and tricks, and this is how to build a thriller setting and like a murder mystery. It was a lot of fun. I amuse myself a lot. Honestly, I just did it because I wanted to do it, and then we also use that for pre-order giveaways. And,
no way!
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So what?
I mean,
so practically, what is one good piece of advice people could take away from wanting to run a more intrigue-heavy campaign? Because, like I said, I think it is not necessarily what people go to right away when they think of D&D, but it's a wonderful space to be in, especially, again, as we're talking about Rime of the Frost Maiden and even Curse of Strahd Revamped coming out too, like playing with some of those ideas are going to be instrumental for Dungeon Masters. So yeah, what's a good piece of advice on how to run that?
I'd say in terms of how to prep for one is make sure you have a good understanding of motivation of your characters. Whether that's behind the scenes or out in the open, it really helps to know what the end game is, so you can get to that point. And even if it goes through like various different side steps and other kinds of adventures your players set you on. It really helps to know what the ultimate end game is. And once you have that, you can also translate that to clues you need to seed into the story. And generally, I'd say there isn't such a thing as too many clues. There is definitely such a thing as too obvious clues.
Yeah.
Be careful with those. But the more subtle ones, you can't go wrong with adding quite a few of those, because your players will certainly miss some. They'll misinterpret others. And there's nothing more fun than giving your players a mystery and having them figure it out. Plot twists are amazing, and I love plot twists and I love surprising people. But there's also that element of seeing players take all the various clues and put them together and come close to or even figure out what the end game is. That is so super gratifying, and for me, it just makes playing fun, because it isn't. I don't want my tables to feel like it's me versus the players. It's something that we create together. So if they figure it out, all the more power to them. That's what I would hope they do.
Yeah. That's, we often think about Dungeon Masters as being adversaries. You're trying to like pull the wool over the eyes of players, but honestly, they want to succeed, and you want to have them succeed in a way that feels satisfying, and doing so by figuring out things from clues, similar to solving a puzzle. Like, those are great feelings that you want to give to your players as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Sweet. Well, it's funny the way you described setting up the mystery, because I mentioned this a couple of times now, and so I feel like I'm plugging myself, but I'm writing a short story now that's going to end up in Dragon Plus that is a murder mystery, and I did the exact opposite. I don't know what is happening at the end. And I was trying to do a lazy DM kind of thing of it, where like I have these characters and I'm going to introduce them and like improvise them, and then I'll figure it out at the end. And then if I need to add clues, I'll add them later once I kind of have a good
retroactively go back and
that's what I was thinking.
Figure out what's happening.
I don't know if that's going to work or not, but it's I basically took your advice and did the opposite.
I mean, to be fair, that is also incredibly legitimate because I know many authors who do the exact same thing.
Really?
And who don't know what their story is going to be like while they're writing it. And that would drive me up a wall. I need to have all the pieces and all like the loose threads so I can use them to weave a story together. And yeah, I'm massively impressed by people who manage to do that and just like go along for the ride and see what happens.
Your editor must love you if you have that much detail up front. Like
I hope so.
They do. They
Thankfully,
told us
they know
love
like
you.
there's an ending at least.
Yeah, exactly. No, I usually have editors who are also quite detail oriented. So it's fun to just like play off each other and figure out together where the story needs to go. And that's honestly, look, writing essentially is teamwork, even though it doesn't always look like that or feel like that. But
Yeah,
it's fun to go on that journey together and then figure it out.
just like D&D.
Yeah. Yep.
It takes a party.
It takes a party and a village of goblins to destroy.
Yeah.
Well, very exciting.
Exactly
I can't wait for more people to get into Even If We Break. And like I said, with this, current meta of what we're talking about for D&D adventures, it's good research. So I hope more people do that.
Yep.
I would love that.
If people want to... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Shelley.
Oh, yeah. I think we're on the same page. But I know there's a lot of things you're working on that you cannot talk to us about. But there's a lot of things that you have already worked on that are even one that's coming out this week. It sounds like the Goosebumps comic.
I know.
Let's get that. My son loves Goosebumps.
I have goosebumps right now.
So fun. I got to write a Goosebumps miniseries comic
that's amazing.
in Fever Swamp. So werewolves are great. So yeah, that's coming out now. First issue just came out, and it'll come out over the next couple of months.
Sounds great.
So yeah, it's been a busy year. I also had a graphic novel come out earlier this year. So
nice.
it's all like,
wow,
all of this has happened during like lockdown and pandemic. The graphic novel came out in March. So it honestly feels like 5 years ago at this point.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. March, remember that? Wow.
Yeah, vaguely. So yeah, I also got to write Barbara Gordon as Oracle for a DC YA graphic novel.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool.
It's been a good year for books for me.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting year on literally every other level. Right. But yeah, I'm really proud of these books.
And readers too. Like I feel like I fell in love with reading more with the amount of downtime that I have. I think Shelley said
me too. Yeah.
So it is the time.
Absolutely. I would hope though that readers, especially now, if they can, order your books from indie bookstores, please, and your local comic stores and your friendly local game stores. Please support them because they're all going through a really hard time.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can get behind that. So yeah, order now. Do it. Get them.
Get all my books.
Done. Did it already. Be like me. Be like me.
Yes, be like Shelley.
I would say, Greg, that you can borrow them, but that doesn't really help.
No, we gotta buy more books. So. Yeah. Can't just
also
borrow.
Be like Shelley. Just get all of them.
Yeah.
I am your muse.
Every single one, and I'll put it on my shelf.
Perfect.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, Marika. It was very fun talking to you.
So late at night too. Now you can go to bed.
Sleep. Thank you so much for having me, though. This was really fun.
This was fun. Thank you so much. So good to talk to you.
And now, and that beer that you were just drinking, now I want to go have one.
Too soon?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, it's afternoon or it's 5 somewhere. I don't know. Both of those phrases apply here.
It's 11 p.m. somewhere.
I was about to say, it's 11 p.m. here, so I feel like that counts.
I
Well,
agree.
we have to, be sympathetic to our guests at all
Exactly.
times.
We want to
so
make our
why not?
guests feel comfortable.
Yeah. I feel like on
That
average it's 5 p.m. between all of us, right? That's how
Yeah.
time goes.
There you go.
That's a good way to think about it.
Oh.
Perfect. Awesome.
Very
Well, thank
cool.
you so much. And we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank
can't wait.
you.
Yay.
Oh, wait. Did we talk about where people can? We know about your upcoming work, but where can people find you?
Oh, right.
Twitter. A lot, honestly.
Too much doom scrolling happening on Twitter.
Too much, yeah. No, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. My handle is MARIEKEYN because I have a very Dutch name. I'm sorry for all the extra letters. I know it's hard, and you can find me on my website as well, which is literally just myname.com. But go through my Twitter because that's probably easier than my spelling all of it.
All right. Easy enough.
I love it. It'll be in the show notes, of course, as well as displayed on our video if you're watching this on YouTube. So we can find you.
You will be found.
I'm going to order the Goosebumps. I'm going to order the graphic novels. We're all ready to go.
Yep.
Excellent. Good life choices.
We all need them.
Yay.